A very good Thursday to everyone. Welcome into today's daily Bible reading for February the 23rd. Today we are reading together about the 8th and ninth plagues that are recorded for us in Exodus chapter 10. I appreciate so much you tuning in for this read on this Thursday. Hope that your week is going well. Let me get the text of Exodus 10 up on the screen for us together, and we'll read from the text here. Again, we've looked so far at the first 7 of the 10 plagues that were offered up against Egypt. God is showing himself to be the one true living God, the all-powerful God that no one can stand up against. And we read yesterday from chapter 9, that one of God's purposes for these plagues was to make that known, that he is the one true living God, that all would know that there is no one on earth like him. Here we're going to read at the beginning of chapter 10 about another purpose, though, of God interacting in the way that he has done with Pharaoh. The fact that Pharaoh's heart has been hardened is going to allow another benefit for the Lord. And this time, though, not concerning the Egyptians or the world, but specifically for his people. We'll see that here at the beginning of chapter 10. Then we'll see about the 8th plague, and we'll check out the 9th plague as well at the second half of the chapter. So let's read together here in Exodus chapter 10 and verse number 1. Exodus chapter 10, verse number 1. Then Yahweh said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may do these miraculous signs of mine among them, and so that you may tell your son and grandson how severely I dealt with the Egyptians and performed the miraculous signs among them. And you will know that I am Yahweh." So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and told him, "This is what Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, says. How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may worship me. But if you refuse to let my people go, then tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. They will cover the face of the land so that no one will be able to see the land. They will eat the remainder left to you that escaped the hail. They will eat every tree you have growing in the fields. They will fill your houses, all your officials' houses, and the houses of all the Egyptians, something your fathers and grandfathers never saw since the time they occupied the land until today." Then he turned and left Pharaoh's presence. Pharaoh's officials asked him, meaning Pharaoh, how long must this man be a snare to us? Let the men go so that they may worship Yahweh their God. Don't you realize yet that Egypt is devastated? So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh. "Go, worship Yahweh your God," Pharaoh said. But exactly who will be going?" Moses replied, "We will go with our young and with our old. We will go with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds, because we must hold Yahweh's festival." He said to them, "Yahweh would have to be with you if I would ever let you and your families go. Look out, you're heading for trouble. No, go, just able-bodied men, worship Yahweh, since that's what you want." And they were driven from Pharaoh's presence. And then Yahweh then said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand and over the land of Egypt, and the locusts will come up over it and eat every plant in the land, everything that the hail left." So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and Yahweh sent an east wind over the land all that day and through the night. And by morning, the east wind had brought in the locusts. The locusts went up over the entire land of Egypt and settled on the whole territory of Egypt. Never before had there been such a large number of locusts, and there never will be again. They covered the surface of the whole land, so that the land was black, and they consumed all the plants on the ground and all the fruit on the trees that the hail had left. Nothing green was left on the trees or plants in the field throughout the land of Egypt. Pharaoh urgently sent for Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against Yahweh your God and against you. Please forgive my sin once more and make an appeal to Yahweh your God so that he will just take this death away from me." Moses left Pharaoh's presence and appealed to Yahweh. And then Yahweh changed the wind to a strong west wind, and it carried off the locusts and blew them into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in all the territory of Egypt. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the Israelites go. Then Yahweh said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, and there will be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be felt. So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness throughout the land of Egypt for 3 days. One person could not see another, and for 3 days they did not move from where they were. Yet all the Israelites had light where they lived. Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, go, worship Yahweh. Even your families may go with you. Only your flocks and herds must stay behind. Moses responded, you must also let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings to prepare for Yahweh our God. Even our livestock must go with us. Not a hoof will be left behind, because we will take some of them to worship Yahweh our God. We will not know what we will use to worship Yahweh until we get there. But Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was unwilling to let them go. Pharaoh said to him, leave me. Make sure you never see my face again, for on the day you see my face, you will die. As you have said, Moses replied, I will never see your face again. And that is Exodus chapter 10, telling the story of the 8th and 9th plagues that were sent against Pharaoh and Egypt. It's good to notice here to begin with, within this text, that, and again, Moses is as it has been, Moses is sent to Pharaoh. He says, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so I can do these miraculous signs of mine among them. Again, part of what's going on here is, yes, God knows exactly what Pharaoh is, what type of man Pharaoh is. He knows the pride and the arrogance of this human being, and he is absolutely using that to his benefit. And he's going to show the rebellious nature of who Pharaoh is, and he's going to use that to allow him the opportunity to show just how powerful he, being Yahweh God, actually is. But here's the thing: it's not only that, though. It's also not just so that the Egyptians and the world will know, but also so that you, being the Israelites, may tell your son and your grandson how severely I dealt with the Egyptians and performed miraculous deeds among them, and you will know that I am Yahweh. This is not just, there's not just a negative benefit, if that makes sense, but there's also a positive benefit. It's not just so others will be fearful of God's wrath against them as rebels, but it's also so that it might endear faithfulness and loyalty from God's people toward him for what he has done for them. But also maybe there's an aspect of fear there as well, that they will make sure they do not incur God's wrath through their own rebellion. Everyone, Egyptian, pagan, Jew, everyone will know that I am Yahweh. So Moses and Aaron, they go to Pharaoh, and the question they ask is, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before Yahweh? How long will your pride and arrogance continue to be your downfall? But here's what you need to know. You need to let the people go. But if you refuse, and kind of what's understood here, we know you're going to refuse. This is what's going to happen. That we're going to bring, I'm going to raise up my staff. There's going to be locusts that come, and they swarm the land. I will bring locusts into your territory. They will cover the surface. They will eat everything left from the hail. They will fill your houses, your officials' houses, the houses of Egyptians, everything. You're going to be overrun by these locusts, and then they leave. There is no opportunity for Pharaoh to respond. They just go, because again, they know exactly how this is going to turn out. As this happens, Pharaoh's officials now, remember, the magicians are done. They were taken out by the bulls. They don't want to deal with this anymore. Now the other officials of Pharaoh's court, they're coming to Pharaoh, and they've had enough, and they say, hey, how long are you going to let this guy continue to do this? Just let the people go. Well, specifically, let the men go, so the men may go worship, because the men were the ones that are necessary for the religious ceremony anyways in their minds. So we'll just let them go and do what they need to do. But here's a sign that Pharaoh's pride and arrogance, it was not only being noticed by God, but it was also being noticed by his own officials. Don't you realize yet that Egypt is devastated? Don't you recognize that your pride and arrogance has led us to be just absolutely smacked in the face? Why continue to be stubborn? Why continue to allow your pride and arrogance to cause us to be harmed? So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he says, all right, go and worship the Lord your God. But then he asks this question. Well, who exactly is going to be going? Because remember, the way it was kind of posed to begin with is we're just going to go 3 days into the wilderness. It's kind of left open-ended. It never says we're going to return. Remember, we showed the difference between what Joseph said to his Pharaoh and then what we see from Moses and Aaron here. So Pharaoh's trying to make sure that a fast one is not being pulled on them. So Moses says, well, everybody's going to go. The young, the old, the males, the females, all of our possessions, we're all going to go because we must hold this festival to Yahweh. And here's Pharaoh thinking that, yeah, you're not going to pull a fast one on me. Yeah, Yahweh would have to be with you. He would actually have to be with you. If you think that I would ever let everybody go, I'm not going to let you all go because you'll never come back. Pharaoh thinks that he's getting past the whole facade of all this. He thinks that he's smart. No, it's just going to be the males. Everybody else will have to stay. This, in his mind, is the way that he's guaranteeing that everyone comes back to him and he doesn't lose this great slave population within his land. So at this point, they're driven from Pharaoh's presence. Pharaoh's probably thinking, how show them? And that is until the Lord then says to Moses, stretch out your hand, which again, I want to recognize here that Moses seems to be taking a much more predominant role within the story as opposed to Aaron. So stretch out your hand over Egypt, and the locusts will come, and they'll come over it. They'll eat every plant, everything that the hell left. So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord sent a strong east wind, which is going to be the same type of wind which is going to part the Red Sea later on. He sent an east wind, and all day and all night the locusts just came in and devoured everything. I highlighted some phrases here that I thought were interesting. The locust went up, they settled on the whole territory, they covered, and they consumed. Reminds me a lot of what the Israelites did. Instead of going up, though, they came down, they settled in Egypt, they covered up Egypt, and then in some sense they were consumed by the Egyptians in the sense that the Egyptians were harsh and tried to harm them and overtake them and really dwindle down their numbers. Well, here Yahweh is bringing retribution against Egypt for the displeasure that they had towards Egypt. Now here is the Lord showing his displeasure against, for the aggression that the Egypts showed towards the Jews. Now here Yahweh is showing his displeasure towards the Egyptians for the way they treat his people, that the locusts have went up, they've settled, they've covered, and now they have consumed Egypt in a very strong way. This is just total devastation, especially once we put the 7th and 8th plagues together, the hail and the locusts. At this point, there's very little left. They have truly been decimated in a very real way. And this seems to make Pharaoh panic because he urgently sends for Moses and Aaron and says, I've sinned against the Lord. This all just fake words here. There's no heart behind all this. He's just saying what is necessary in order to deliver himself. So make an appeal so that Yahweh will take this away from me. And Moses does that, even though he knows, I'm pretty sure, he's well aware that this is all a facade, but he appeals to Yahweh. And now Yahweh sends a west wind. He changed the wind from coming from the east, now going to the west. And it says it carried off the locusts and blew them into the Red Sea. A little bit of foreshadowing there. I think we would be able to see pretty clearly. And at this point, there's not a single locust left in all the land of Egypt, but Yahweh hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the Israelites go again. Everything that Yahweh is doing, he knows exactly what is going to be the result, and that's for his purpose so that the Egyptians will know, so that the world will know, so that Israel will know that he alone is Yahweh God. Well, then the 9th plague comes. This plague is the plague of darkness. And like the previous, some of the previous plagues, it just kind of happens. There's no ability for Pharaoh to respond at all. Yahweh tells Moses to stretch out your hand toward heaven, and there will be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness that can be felt. Darkness is often understood in ancient Near Eastern writings as a symbol of chaos, that it brings disorder. It does not allow clarity of sight as light does. So there's chaos here. And also, this is certainly a play on creation once again, that so many of these plagues are reversals of creation. Because what was it that Yahweh did in the creation week? He said, let there be light, and there was light. It brought peace and clarity to the chaos. And yet here it's just chaos all throughout Egypt, except where his people are. I think certainly as we read at the end of verse 23, yet all the Israelites had light where they lived. That is certainly a play on the Lord saying, let there be light. Again, at this Pharaoh, who, if we're going to tie in some of the paganistic roots here, there was a god in Egypt known as Re. I think that's how you pronounce it, R-E. And Pharaoh was often thought of as the son of Re. So here is Yahweh completely just neutering this supposed God and the power that they believed that he had, saying, oh, you think your God gives you sunlight? I'm going to take it all away. And the son of this God that you have so much faith in, I'm going to show him that he is nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's exactly what Yahweh does here. So Pharaoh once again summons Moses and tries to bargain with him again, saying, okay, you can take your families, but leave your livestock. And of course, you're thinking about this. How could that be? How can we leave the livestock? Because we've got to have animals to worship with. I think again, Pharaoh's point here is he's trying to make sure they come back. But Moses says that can't happen. We've got to have animals in which to worship and make sacrifices. We're not going to know what sacrifices to make until we get there. And of course, this just continues to infuriate Pharaoh. His heart continues to be hardened even more. He's unwilling to let them go. And Pharaoh says, all right, this time of bargaining that we've had over the how many months, I think we probably have seen here with the plagues, depending on some of the timestamps that we've had, the time for bargaining is over. Make sure you never see my face again, for on the day you see my face, you will die. There is zero respect here of Pharaoh toward the messenger of Yahweh. And what Yahweh's doing, he's really sealing his own fates. And although that's already been done, that's probably something that should be highlighted here, is that the fate of Pharaoh has already been sealed in the fact that his heart has been hardened. This outcome that we know of the story of Exodus, it has been absolutely determined. It cannot be changed at this point. And what Pharaoh is doing is absolutely sealing that even more in the fact that he's sending away his only means of salvation. And Moses says, okay, as you have said, I will never see your face again. So at this point, we have these final plagues of the sets. Remember, we have 3 sets of 3 plagues that really match each other pretty well. The first one's like the 4th, and then also like the 6th, and then the second like the 5th and the 7th, and then the third like the 6th and the 9th. They have a lot of commonalities that we didn't highlight extensively, but I might actually put together the little chart that I have in this book here. I'll post it. I'm trying to remember to do that. I'll have to make it up myself, but I'll try to make my own version of it so that you can see kind of the way that these plagues do, the commonality between them in these 3 sets. But now these have taken place. Now it's time for the grand finale, which is going to take place it's foretold in chapter 11. Foretold in chapter 11, but we're going to see it actually being carried out later on. What we're going to do tomorrow is read chapter 11, but not just chapter 11, also chapter 12, because chapter 11 is really, really short. So we're going to read chapter 12 as well, which is the instructions for the Passover and seeing that take place. And then we're also going to have the beginnings of the Exodus itself in chapter 12 and verse 29, whenever the firstborn are struck. We'll see that tomorrow as well. So we'll read together tomorrow on Friday, the 24th, Exodus chapter 11 and Exodus chapter 12. Thanks so much for tuning in for the reading today, though. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those in the comment section. I appreciate you doing this. I hope it's been a good refresher for you. If it's been a little bit since you've gone through the plagues, hopefully your memory of them has been refreshed, and maybe you've even learned a little bit about this text more than you did before. Thanks so much for tuning in again. We'll be back at it again tomorrow. Take care. God bless.